I'm Louis Cavors. Welcome to our chapter number 7, Realism, Expressionism, and Formalism. This is an introduction. So I really came to liking these three topics, this realism, expressionism, and formalism, because so often when we look at works of art, they can fall clearly into one of these categories or be a little bit of a combination of two or three of these categories. So it's a great way of looking at art. And sometimes when people don't understand an abstract piece, they're looking and wanting more realism in a piece. And sometimes people, if they're looking at a very realistic piece and so a piece of naturalism, they naturally want more emotion or more expressionism. So this is kind of a great way to just look at what's out there in the art world. So one of the things we've been talking about language, and the natural thing perhaps you realize with any image or anything we encounter is if we think of it as a language, we want to interpret it and we want to understand and we want to know, what does this mean? Yeah. So meaning is a way of interpreting the world around us and understanding the world. So we're going to explore that topic a little bit in this video. To begin with, I like to show this by Eugene Smith. Here are two images. Eugene Smith was a photographer. He photographed a lot for Life magazine, some quite amazing photographs that he made. But he said that hardening of the categories causes art disease. Now, this is kind of a classic way of saying, as artists, we tend not to like ourselves to be pigeonholed or to be sort of understood in only one way. Yeah, a lot of times artists rebel against everything fitting into a really specific category. And one of the things that we realize with our mind, and we're going to get to the mind a little bit with this idea of structuralism, that so often when we look at the world, we look for meaning in the world, we look for relationships, and we look for understanding of how everything fits, yeah? And part of what we do with works of art is we like to categorize them. So we look for similarities between works of art and how we can sort of link them together so that we can even have deeper understandings of works of art. And if you've ever gone to a gallery exhibit, sometimes a gallery exhibit is one person's work, and that is a kind of grouping also. But in other types, we might have a dance concert where everyone would say, well, this is the student dance concert or the BFA dance concert. It's a group of works by BFA students. Yeah. And that's a way of understanding the magnitude of what are we looking at and how do these pieces relate with one another. Sometimes people will call it a faculty dance concert also, because here we're looking at works by faculty. But sometimes you'll go to an exhibit that will just pick a subject and have works by various artists that all somehow relate to that subject or that way of working or that category of art. So we see that in terms of interpretation all of the time. And it's a way that we look at works and we interpret the world around us. Now, this is a little fun game. I like to show these images. Here are 4 animals. And if you look at these 4 animals, we could play a little bit of a game where if this were like the Sesame Street game, I might say one of these things doesn't belong here. One of these things is just not like the others. Yeah. So you might look at this image and you might suddenly say, well, the snake doesn't belong here because the other 3 images are all birds, and particularly they're water birds. Yeah. And they fit together. So that's a fascination to me because that is the structuralist part of your brain looking at this image and making sense of the world, especially if I say one doesn't belong, which would you pick to take out of this sequence? Yeah. Now, I actually played a little trick here on you because you could also look at this image and say, well, the mallard duck is not pink, and every other animal in this image is pink. So that's another way that we could categorize and we could understand this image that we're seeing. Yeah. So perhaps someone in our group would look at this and say, let's take this mallard duck, this male mallard duck, out of the equation and not include him with the group. Yeah. Now, if you wanted to say, well, all of them belong, we could say that they were all animals, that these were all living creatures that move and have all of the attributes of being part of the animal world. So perhaps you would say they do belong. And then someone might also say, all of these animals belong together because they all lay eggs. So each of them fits together and we could understand them as a group. Yeah. So this is a kind of interesting just phenomenon. And again, the biggest reason I wanted to show you this is that idea of which of these doesn't belong and what does your brain do when it encounters an image and then encounters a question of how do I interpret this image and how do these things go together? Now, in the visual arts, we have lots of categories that we look at, and sometimes we call these isms, where we could talk about romanticism or classicism or postmodernism or realism or formalism or expressionism or impressionism, cubism. There's just pointillism. There's just a numerous amount of ways that we've looked at the world around us and we've categorized it. Yeah, the same happens in dance where we can even categorize it by genre. This is the modern dance world. This is the contemporary dance world. This is ballet. This is the jazz world. That each of those things, we have created bodies of work to kind of understand the work that's out there. Yeah. So, and again, sometimes artists rebel against those. Now, in our lecture today, I'm really wanting to look at the three. We're going to probably spend more time on realism than any of the others because when we decide to bring representation into a work, where we look at the world around us and we want to bring that world into the work of art, that creates lots of different categories and lots of different ways that we deal with it. So we're going to probably look at that, realism and imitation, much more than we look at expressionism and we look at formalism. Yeah, those sometimes are a little bit clearer and a little bit more simple for us to look at. So welcome to realism, expressionism, and formalism, and welcome to chapter number 7.